James, and welcome to another review. We're going back to Twilight 2000, and I'm actually going to have a look at a new chapter that we haven't looked at yet. I'm going to look at chapter 5, which looks at equipment and vehicles, weapons, basically everything that the PCs will want to get their hands on. Now, it's going to be quite important in a game like this. It is very statistic heavy. It's a sort of game where people will want to have different types of kit. Yeah, I mean, you could simplify it down to an assault rifle or things like that, but most players are probably going to want realistic kit. So let's actually have a look what we've got in it. Now, the start of the chapter is quite good. It talks about actually getting your hands on equipment. It talks about trading, so you can barter for equipment, and there's a rule for bargaining with that, which works quite sensibly. You've also got, more importantly, the actual availability. Now, it's not as detailed as the previous editions. The problem I found with the previous editions, though, was, okay, I haven't found that pistol in that barrel length. Can I roll again to try it for a different barrel length? So the end result was you really ended up with a situation where you would find what you wanted or close to it fairly easily. This breaks them down more into categories. So you've got 3 categories. You've got common, which are available on a 3 or more on a 6-sided dice, scarce, which are available on a 5 or a 6, and rare, which will generally not be available. And it does break down what you'd expect to find within them. Most of the common weapons that would be available in the civilian market or the military use heavily, like assault, even up to assault rifles, they're all pretty common. You go into the scarce, you're talking more the machine guns, the rocket launchers, oddly, cars and pickup trucks. And I would have thought they would have been, cars would probably be a bit more common, but perhaps this is just the working versions. And then you get the rare, and you're looking at things there like guided missiles, main battle tanks, and so on. And it also gives you an idea of how many of them would be available. So for example, when you look at the common ones, you usually find a 6-sided dice of them. If it's ammunition, it would be 2 6-sided dice times 10. Things like that. So it's quite a simple little mechanism. It works relatively well. Once you actually get the item, and I've just spotted something that perhaps just does jump out as an interesting little point, which I hadn't noticed before. It talks about the fact that you can get the items for normal reliability. Let's see how they phrased it. So it's normal reliability, but you can reduce the cost by getting lower reliability ones that have been damaged. And actually, it's not particularly clear, but you'd actually roll that right at the start. So yeah, that makes sense. Talks about damage, where the reliability class drops, how to repair it, how to scavenge for parts, and it also lists very usefully items that you can jury rig, that you can make just using spares. So that makes a lot of sense. You've got gun care, so every week which you've used your firearms, you have to spend a shift service in them and make a roll, or the reliability drops a step. It also talks about you can do it in other circumstances. I would suggest that even if they're not used, that step of maintenance is needed, otherwise you should be rolling. Perhaps on that one, roll it with a modifier or something, perhaps for that. Vehicle maintenance, again, if a vehicle moves, it needs maintenance, requiring a tech roll, and again the vehicle class will drop a step. Again, I would probably have that even if the vehicle doesn't move, that you probably need to do that. Perhaps at a longer interval, perhaps say on a monthly interval, I'm not sure. But with that one, it doesn't really make any difference. It takes the same amount of time to maintain a motorbike as it does an M1 tank. So I think hopefully by the time we get to the beta edition, they will consider that and actually add something in for that. So moving into the actual weapons charts then, we've got quite a variety. Melee weapons are fairly predictable. You've got a bottle, and I'm personally going to amend that with the 2 parts, which is bottle and broken bottle. You've got all the predictable things like knife, clubs, spiked baseball bat. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Chaos Death spiky bits there. theory, but it's not overpowered. What it realistically does is it reduces the crit number, making it easier to get a critical than a baseball bat. So that's the only real difference between it. You got a bayonet, you got machete, and an axe. One thing I did spot that was missing is a spear, which, to be honest, would be fairly easy to improvise. So I would probably add that one in. Two types, probably a decently manufactured one, and a bodged together carving knife tied onto a broom handle, very similar to the sort of kit you'd got the local defence volunteers using at the Second World War era. So moving on to the bows and thrown, you've got a rock, a hunting bow, a crossbow, and an improvised bow. Okay, I'm personally probably going to split the bow a little bit. I think that the sheer difference in the number of and strength of bows makes a huge difference. Even just splitting it into long bow and short bow, that's probably not enough for me. I mean, I own a long bow which is £25 pull, which is nothing. So I'm probably going to put a little bit in there. And again, I think there needs to be an improvised crossbow. You know, the truck springs being the classic improvised crossbow. So I think that will need adding. So under civilian firearms, which is the next category, we've got a bit of variety. We've got a 38 revolver, we've got a Glock, we've got a Beretta, some hunting rifles, assorted ones, an improvised pipe gun, which I really wouldn't want to fire with that one. You've got then shotguns. You've got a variety. You've got a double-barreled. You've got a pump action, and you've got a semi-automatic. Again, with a pipe gun version, they work fairly well. They're good generic ones. The only thing I would comment is they've only got the 12-bore versions. I'd be looking at possibly 20 and 410s. But I've got to remember this is just a starting guide. Hopefully they'll bring a lot more in. And at the end there you've got a zip gun as well, which is the jury-rig pistol, which does look remarkably like a well-rod pistol, but a bit more crude. So that's the civilian ones. Moving on to the military, you've got the Beretta, which is a repeat of the version that you have in the civilian ones. The rules do repeat the same weapon numerous times, and I do find that a bit annoying. I personally would have rathered one list with who uses them. That works better for me. The one thing I do like is, and I'll put an illustration up, and they do actually show an illustration of each of the weapons as you look at them, or most of them, so you get a good feel for what they look like. You've got the M16 in the A1 and A2 versions, and you've got the M4 in the M4 and the M4A1. Now, one thing I have picked up looking at the statistics for that is there is no reason whatsoever to carry an M4. When you look at it, the only difference, well, it's cheaper, but the only difference is the range. So personally, what I'm thinking of doing with that is lowering the encumbrance value, or the weight of it, from a 1 to a 3/4, so that there is a bit of a reason to actually carry it other than just the price. Moving on, you get the couple of sniper rifles, the M40A3 and the M21, and you've also got the M82A1 Barrett. Grenade launchers, you've got the M79 and the M203 and the Mark 19. Machine gun wise, you've got the M249, the M60, the M240B, and the M2. Anti-tank weapons, M72A2, A3, sorry, the M136, which is sometimes known as the AT4, the FGM-148 Javelin, top attack, the M47 Dragon, that's still around, and the tow missile. So you've got a fair variety for US troops there. There's no real issues with that. The Soviet ones, you've got the Makarov PM, the PSM, the AKM, the AK-74. There's no notes of anything for folding stock or how that affects them in game terms. Again, I might consider with that possibly knocking the weight down slightly, because the weight isn't just the weight, it's also how encumbering they are. So I might just put that in there. The PP-19 Bison, which is a 9mm submachine gun with the strange helical magazine underneath the barrel. They've got that one. The GP25, which you could also use for things like the BG15, they're functionally identical, and the AGS17. You've then got the SVD63, usually known as the SVD or the Dragunov, which is the sniper rifle. You've got the PKM, which unfortunately has got the wrong illustration, and I know a lot of people have jumped on that. They've put an RPD in. You've got the RPK and the RPK74, and it appears the cat wants to get in on the video. Okay, you've got the DSH K38, the Dushka, and the NSV into the heavy machine guns. So they work quite nicely. Good sort of choice of weapons there. I can't really fault what they've picked. You've got the RPG-7V and the RPG-16. Now, it is worth noting that the RPG-16 was being phased out by this time scale for the RPG-7D, which was the folding version. So it's something just to bear in mind. I'd also note that the scenarios, the encounters, tend to have the RPG-16. It should be the RPG-7 in the bulk of the times. You've then got the KPV, because that's only going to be used on vehicles and ground mount. And you've got the 9M113 Konkurs, which is usually known as the AT-5 Spandrel in the West. So you've got, again, a good collection of Soviet equipment. I'd probably add in a few of the other missiles. I think you could probably do with the AT-3 and 4, definitely the 4, because they are quite likely to be encountered. Going on to the Swedish weapons, we now get the stuff where we start a bit of duplication. We've got the Pist 88, which is the Glock 17. So we've got another duplicate there. We've got the AK-4, which is usually better known as the G3. The AK-5, which is usually known as the Belgian FNC. You've got the PSG 90, which is the better known as the L118A1 if you're British, or the PM96 if you're sort of using the more common designation. You've got a version of the Barrett, you've got a version of the Mark 19, the MP5, and a version of the Minimi. And again, for some of these, they are just basically repeating the statistics. They're identical. You've also got the version of the Belgian FN Mag 58, which again is, I've just spotted that's actually down as Mag 59, it should be 58. Known as sort of the M240 for the Americans, or the Jimpy, or the L7A1 if you're British. Version of the 50 cal. You've then got the Carl Gustav 84mm recoilless rifle. Nice to see that in, because that works nicely for my British. It's usually just called the Carl Gustav or Charlie G. And you've got a version of the AT4, which was actually the original version that the AT4 came from. So you've got Swedish weapons are pretty sensible. Polish weapons, now this is where I felt this was a bit of an annoying factor. Most of them are basically the Soviet weapons with the same statistics. So you've got the P83, which is the Makarov, the AKM, and it even says see the AKM for more information. Now they have they're putting the PMK60, which is the version with the adapter for firing rifle grenades. Unfortunately, the illustration is of a standard AK. It doesn't actually show that. You've got the PM84, which is a submachine gun. Okay, that's unique to the Poles. And again, then you've got the equivalents for things like the SVD, the RPK, the PKM, and they've even copied the wrong illustration across. You've got the same with the heavy machine guns. You've got those, and you've got one that is different, which is the WZ 1974, which is the Polish underbarrel grenade launcher. You've also got the stats for the RPG-7V, and one thing I don't understand with this is the fact that the statistics are quite different. On the Soviet one, the critical number is a 3, whereas the RPG under the Poles is a critical of 8. Now, I can't see any logical reason for that. I'm assuming that there was a change in statistics and only one was changed. They've got some other weapons as well. You've got the FN FAL, yeah, okay, slight modification, and we've then got British SLR. The FAMAS, if you like the French assault rifle. You've got the VZ61 Scorpion machine pistol, the Uzi, which was very common in Europe, PSG-1, the Armbrust, and the Panzerfaust 3. So you can, if you pulled the statistics from across different ones, pulling out the AK-4 for example, you do end up with most of the German weapons. The Brits, the older British kit's pretty much covered, just misses out the Bren. The more modern kit using the SA-80 series isn't covered. Now I have put statistics for all those on the website, and I'll put a link in the description. Please feel free to pop by and have a look what I've put. So you have got a good core of weapons. Personally, I think I'd have got rid of the duplicates, and once I'd got rid of the duplicates, I then have a bit more space to put some wider ranging weapons in. Grenades, yeah, fragmentation, white phosphorus, anti-tank, and improvised. One thing that's actually missing, bizarrely, is smoke grenades. And again, I've put the statistics for those on my site, particularly since they're mentioned elsewhere. So you have got those. Yeah, they're not a bad variation. You might want to differentiate between offensive and defensive grenades, but again, this is just the starting rules. You've then got all the statistics for the artillery. That's all in there. How much it costs for the ammunition and things like that. Mines, there's a decent selection of mines, at least decent selection of American and Soviet mines, including things like the Claymore and the Soviet equivalent, the Mon 50. So that there's a decent set of mines, enough to get you by easily. And let's be honest, a mine is a mine. It's probably going to not take a lot just to vary that. We then move on to the vehicles. There's quite a good selection of vehicles for the countries that they've used. Generally for each one they've got a small runaround like a Jeep or a Humvee. You get a main battle tank, sometimes with a variation. You get an APC. So there's enough again to get us going until we get more statistics. I do find it odd that they've not differentiated between turret and hull armour. That's a little bit of an issue, particularly if you're looking at something like the British Challenger series, which had a much tougher turret than hull. So you might have to look at that. And again, hopefully this is still the alpha. Let's see what comes out in the beta, which is due out in February. So American vehicles, you've got the M1 and the M1A1. Yeah, they're quite a nice little set. For those who like the old M1A2 Giraffe, you'll find the statistics on my website for that. We've got these are the big write-ups. You then got an M151 Jeep, the M113 with the ACAV, and the M901 ITV. Although amusingly, the group in the examples are always using the M150 earlier version, so I might need to put that one in. You've got the M2 and M3 Bradley. Now they haven't differentiated, which does cause a problem because the Bradley had a lot more storage for ammunition and didn't have as many crew seats in particular, so you've got to consider that. They've also not differentiated it into which version it is of the Bradley. So again, that might just take a little bit of work. They're the ones you get a nice illustration for. They say there are others. The LAV 25 is in there. Obviously in real life that was just used by the Marines, although it was trialled by the Army during Desert Storm by the 82nd Airborne. So there are a few others in there. The M60A3 is in there, for example, as well. So you have got a reasonable sort of variety there. Moving on, you've got the Soviet ones. You've got UAZ 469, so it's equivalent to the Jeep. You've got the BTR series. You've got the 60, 70 and 80. The only thing I would caution on that is the BTR 80 statistics really look like the BTR 82 statistics. The BTR 80 should still have the KPV machine gun rather than the 30mm that it's put in, and it should also have smoke dischargers, so that's something to consider. You've then got the T series tanks with a nice illustration of a T72, and they've actually given you a good variety. You've got the T55, T62, T64, T72 and T80. So a good variety. You probably need to start differentiating some of the variants because there are a heck of a lot of variants. For example, it would well be worth including the T55 AM2, which added a laser rangefinder and the horseshoe armour on the turret plus side skirts. So again, starting vehicles, they're great. There's everything I would need there, everything I'd want. geeky in me would probably want to add a few more, and I've got no doubt that'll follow. So you then got the BMP series, and you've got the BMP 1, 2 and 3. Now again, I've got a few issues with the statistics. The BMP 1, for example, doesn't have any form of missile. It should have the AT3 Saga. Yeah, that should be in there. Later versions did have the AT4, which again we haven't got the statistics for. They've put the AT5 on the BMP2, but it's worth noting that the export version had the AT4. So it's not going to take a lot to sort of modify that. Yeah, fairly sort of straightforward. You've also got things like a 6x6 truck, a 4x4 truck, the BRDM2 reconnaissance vehicle, and the PT-76, which is a nice little addition. Swedish ones, and I'm not an expert on Swedish military equipment of the Cold War, but you've got a 4x4, a 6-wheeled variant of the same vehicle, the BV-206, which is a nice one to have, because that's used by the Americans. I believe it's the M973, and it's also used by the British, so that's quite useful. You got this STRF 90, Stridsvagen, I believe that's pronounced, which is basically their IFV, and you've got the classic S-tank. Now the S-tank, in all fairness, is a vehicle that's probably the closest one you'd find to game shoot 'em ups, because one person can actually control everything in it, which is a useful little bit of trivia. They've also mentioned a couple of others. There's a Finnish produced 6x6 APC, the PATG B180, the PBV 302, which is the APC, and the STRV 121, which is the German Leopard 2A4, which is a useful one to have included. I'd like to see the Leopard 1 stats in that might be more useful for me, but yeah, if you're playing in Sweden, I suppose it makes sense. So you've got all of those. They then include some other military vehicles, the Land Rover, which is an ideal thing to include, AMX-10RC, the French reconnaissance vehicle, the Weasel, which is the German airborne one, Transportenpanzer Fuchs, 6x6 wheeled APC, the Saracen, a bit of an odd choice for the British. You'd have thought that the Saxon would have been more appropriate, but the Saracen is still used in, or was still used in the time period in Northern Ireland, so it does get used there. You've got the Marder, useful one to include, the Warrior, which is the British IFE, Challenger 1, yeah, and the Leclerc, good to see them, and the Leopard 2A4, so statistics for that basically repeated. You've then got the Polish military vehicles, and this is where they actually did do it the way I would like, where they haven't repeated the statistics. They've given you the different ones, and they basically said see the Russian versions. So I've got a few extra ones. You've got the Honka 4012, which is a 4x4 pickup truck, the Star 266, which is a 6x6 truck. You've also got the MTLB, which I'm surprised to see under Polish rather than Soviet, because it's still in use today by the Soviets. As a bit of trivia, it's possibly the best one to use if you're playing in Sweden, because it's the only Soviet vehicle fitted with a heater. You've got the BWP1, which is the the Polish equivalent of the Soviet BMP1, and again same sort of comments, it's missing the missile and so on. And you've got the PT91 TWARDY, because I've got no idea how that's pronounced in Polish, I'm afraid, which is a late model T72M1 that's been basically upgraded by the Poles. So quite a nice little section on there, and as a result of not repeating information, they've actually got all the Polish ones on one page as opposed to the 304 pages that are used with the others. We then come on to gear. There's things that you can add to weapons like telescopic sights, night vision, bipods, tripods and suppressors. They are fairly straightforward, sort of the gear there. You've got body armour in that you've got steel helmets, you've got Kevlar helmets, flak jackets and plate insert armour. So they're all fairly straightforward. Communication gear, there's a really good section on US and Soviet military radios. There's a nice little add-on box all about EMP, and it does give you the rules for how far they can all transmit. There's a tucked away little note that's easy to miss at the start of the vehicle statistics though, that actually says vehicle mount radios double the range. Now I'm surprised they didn't actually give any radios for the Swedes or the Poles. I'm assuming the Poles are still using the Soviet ones, but I've got no idea what radios the Swedes use. And obviously other countries like the British ones probably need adding as well. Again, see the website for details. There's a little bit on civilian radios, talks about that. Now signalling gear, it has things like signal panels, strobe lights and signal flares. Observation gear, you've got binoculars, night vision goggles, thermal optics, flashlights, searchlights. Bizarrely a compass, I'm not quite sure why that's under observation gear, and GPS, and it does talk about how effective GPS is, and basically they're down to about 50% effectiveness as most of the satellites have been destroyed. I would have put it higher, but that's reasonable. You've then got the protective gear, so you've got the things like the chemical detection agents, the Geiger counters, masks, NBC suits, and a raincoat, because that actually has a bit of an effect on chemical weapons. Med supplies, fairly straightforward. Disposable personal med kits, doctor's med kits, surgical instrument, antibiotics, pain reliever, atropine auto injector. So there's plenty in there. We've lost the slight detail in the antibiotics of the positive, negative and broad spectrum that was in the earlier editions. It's just now antibiotic. I think that's reasonable. Tools and spare parts, all the sort of spare parts that you'd expect to find, including things like the actual spare parts bits. So it gives you things like weapon spare part needed to repair an inoperable weapon, can also be used to jury rig weapons, gives you the weight and the price. Then you've got your fuels and stills, so you've got your petrol and diesel, you've got the alcohol fuels, which is obviously much more common, and the stills that are needed to produce them. You've then got electricity, so you get generators, small batteries, and a car battery. Now that's a useful little addition. I do quite like that one. Explosives, we've got plastic explosive, dynamite sticks, chemicals, and improvised explosives. So I like that. Again, we've lost a little bit of the detail in that we used to have all the detonators and things like that in there. I think you probably need something like that add in, but again, it depends what level of play you're looking to. Food and drink, so you've got rations, domestic food and wild food, yeah, and then field gear. You've got the backpack, you've got the fatigues, which are fairly straightforward. They've assumed that plain clothing is sort of the norm, and if you're wearing camouflage you do get a +1 modifier for recon rolls for ambushes and staying undetected. You've got thermal fatigues, and then you get your tents and fishing gear. So there is a reasonable amount of kit in there. There's probably enough to get you started. You'll probably spot gaps in there. There are things that are listed in the character generation section that you don't get, such as books to do with your speciality if you sort of an academic type character. So there are a few little discrepancies and touches there. Having said that, there's enough to play the game easily, and this is the alpha. I've put some feedback on the website, and if you've got the alpha, I'd encourage you to do the same. Let's see what Free League make of our comments, and let's see what they bring in to supplement what's in there. Overall, it's decent. It needs that one more edit, which is what an alpha is for. It's basically gone out for people who are nitpickers like me to go through it and go, need to change that. That's not quite right. I'm looking forward to seeing the beta edition. The camera decided to cut out there. So we've got everything there. I'm looking forward to the beta edition. Beta edition is due out in February. What I'll do in February is probably look at the changes that have come in from the alpha, and we'll see where we go from there. I'm kind of hoping that we're going to get the equipment looked at, little changes made, and if not, they're not massive tweaks. They're things that I'll probably be doing myself, and I know there's others working on vehicles and things out there. So we'll see what comes out. We'll see what other people produce, and I think there's everything then for a good game. Hopefully that review's been useful for you, and I'll see you soon for another review.